The article I chose was Understanding Attention Deficit / Hyperactivity Disorder from Childhood to Adulthood. A summary of this article. So they started out with an introduction. They stated that ADHD is one of the most common neurobehavioral disorders for children. They also talked about how there are many exceptionalities that can coexist with ADHD, such as bipolar disorder, ODD, conduct disorder, depression, and anxiety. They stated that ADHD is diagnosed by looking at the cognitive, hyperactive impulse features of the person, whereas bipolar disorder is diagnosed by looking at mood instability and irritability range. So they just laid out what ADHD was versus what bipolar disorder was, because sometimes people can get them confused. Also, they talked about how anxiety is a very prominent symptom in ADHD, and that people with ADHD are twice as likely to smoke cigarettes than people who and have substance abuse than people who do not have ADHD. They then went on to discuss diagnosing ADHD. It can be diagnosed in children, adolescents, and adults. To be diagnosed, the child must meet the guidelines in the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, and they lay out symptoms, and these symptoms are inattention difficulty sustaining attention and mental effort, forgetfulness and distractibility, hyperactivity, fidgeting, excessive talking, and restlessness, and impulsivity difficulty waiting one's turn and frequent interruption of others. For an adult to be diagnosed, they said that adults must have had a child onset and or persistent and current symptoms. The article then went on to talk about treatment for ADHD. They do have things like psychosocial interventions that can help. These are things that are like not medications. So being that like we're gonna all be teachers, we can use all of these in our classrooms. So they stated that educational remediation was one of them, structure and routine, so just having a day laid out that the student can follow so they know what's going to happen next, and then having a cognitive behavioral approach. These are all things that can be helpful for students with ADHD, but then there are treatments that are medical, so like medications like stimulants, and there are other medications that help ADHD, but they mainly focused on stimulants, and those help treat the symptoms of ADHD. Next, the article went in to talk about how you can support students with ADHD, so specifically in the classroom. They stated that teachers can conduct individual and class-wide interventions. The teacher should be trained in understanding how boredom, peer action, and unclear, inconsistent rules can cause children to have behavior problems. They discussed acting a reward punishment system to help encourage good behavior, and then also having accommodations for your students, so maybe having them sit closer to your desk, eliminating certain distractions, and having lessons that are repetitive and familiar for these students. Finally, the article wrapped up with an overall conclusion, bringing all of the ideas together. So they stated that ADHD is a prevalent worldwide disorder that frequently persists through adolescence into adult years. It has been reconceptualized as more of a chronic condition, with approximately half of children continuing to exhibit symptoms and impairment into adulthood. It can co-occur with other disorders like we talked about, so like conduct disorder, anxiety disorder, and other mood disorders. It can cause impairments in academic occupations and social situations. And then we talked about how there was ways of treating ADHD, and that medicine shouldn't always be considered the first option, and that there are other options out there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about an assistive technology that a student with ADHD could use. So the technology I chose was a pen from the company LiveScribe, and it basically is a pen that allows you to record voices while writing, and taking notes, and then turning those recordings and what you wrote into digital notes. Okay, so how does the pen work? So the pen has a built-in microphone that you can turn on when you're taking notes, so you can record voices. It's equipped with a speaker as well, and it also has plenty of storage, so you won't ever run out when you're writing notes. And then it is also equipped with a camera, and that's how it captures your handwriting, so you can transfer it to being digital. Okay, so just continuing to go more in depth, they call what you see on the pictures pen casting, which I think is really cool. But basically, the pen can capture your handwriting by using a high-speed camera, like I said, and then that can digitally translate so you can access your notes online. So while using the pen, it takes down what you write and then it copies it digitally, and you can use a special notebook, which you can see in the right picture, to do that. And then you can see on the left side, when you go online on your digital notes, if you were recording a voice at the time, you can play the voices and see your handwriting at the same time, so you can see what you were writing when someone was lecturing. So why does this technology work with ADHD? So typically children with ADHD have a hard time focusing, and so this pen allows them to be able to go back and listen to parts of a lecture, for example, that they might not have been paying attention to. And then it also allows them to go back and focus on what they were writing, not just the audio. So obviously any teacher can record what they're teaching, but the pen allows them to have a visual that they can go back and see what they're writing at the time of when they're listening to the lecture that the teacher was saying. So they're not going to get bored from just listening to something. They also have a visual as well to see and guide them through their notes. And then obviously children with ADHD can sometimes have trouble paying attention on like during the lecture. So being able to go back and listen to things that they might not have caught the first time is really effective for them. Okay, and finally, how can you get the pen? So to purchase the pen, you can go to their website, and it is around $180. So it is accessible in the fact that anybody can buy it online, but obviously it is quite pricey, so it's not accessible to everybody. But if a student with ADHD believes this would help them, I would encourage them to get the school involved to help them purchase the item. And then finally, I'm going to state a quote that I found on their webpage that I feel like really supports kids with ADHD, and that is, write less and listen more. Knowing your smart pen will capture everything. So I really like this quote for kids with ADHD because it gives them reassurance and confidence in the classroom setting because of the knowledge that they have everything recorded and they can go back and listen to anything at any time. And then finally, these are my resources.